Well folks, welcome back to the workshop. Today we've got a little Makita hammer in here for repair. This one's still up and running, but it's needed some TLC. She's running a wee bit rough and she's not got a very good hammer out of her. This is the old HM0860C. That's actually a 2008 machine. So a fair bit of work done. But you can tell it needs a service anyway. You can actually hear the striker bolt with the hammer flopping around on side. So not great in that regard. You can't be hammering all that well. The O-rings will be worn, so they're too slack. Plus I'd imagine the grease is going to be dried up on it because there's no resistance there at all. But the motor is still running. Sounds very rough, but that's more a bearing sound. So hopefully this one can be fixed up. A quick wee service and some new bearings. So let's tear it apart and see if we can fix it. Now what he also says is there's a lot of play in the actual chuck whenever he has a flat chisel on. This here chuck lock for allowing you to rotate the chisel. It has a lot of play. Don't know if I can do anything with that there. He wants it actually just sitting straight the whole time and not moving at all. That, I don't know if it can be fixed. It could be just down to wear inside the actual tool holder. But we'll see if we can do anything with it. Well, that's not lost any tension anyway. Whew, that's still tight. Normally they get covered in grease and grit and actually start to wear, become thinner, making them easier to take off, but that one's still tight. Now down inside of this mess there'll be another little spring clip. There it is there. Sometimes you have to wash them out just to find the clip. Prise that out. Underneath then I'll be holding in a metal plate. With a nice lump of grease on it. Pull that out and then you can free out these bearings here. 4 little steel ball bearings. That sleeve will come off. Chuck's always the worst bit. Now what else I'm going to do is just run it to see if there's any sparking coming out of it. This particular model is sometimes hard to tell if the motor's actually sparking or not. Even under these brush covers, you can't see really anything. Something has been rubbing on the fan, look. It's all worn. Let's see what caused that. Now, just don't stick your hand in anything here now because she is live. You install your switch cable. Looks alright. No blue light coming out of it anyway. Just take off the cable too, to keep it out of the way, make dismantling a little bit easier. The brushes are well worn down, so it's definitely due a service anyway. Something the cover can get tight. There we go. The grease and the grit gets in behind there. It just binds it up, so it just all sticks together. But a soft hammer or a dead blow hammer soon gets it knocked off. Them bearings actually don't seem too bad. Housing's not damaged either. Sometimes it could be a bad bearing or a bearing that's been changed before, but the one previously had destroyed the housing and it's flapping about. There's nothing wrong with that. Housing's okay, feels okay, nothing's burnt. The noise could be a bad armature, but I don't think it is. That's even stone cold after me running for a few seconds. If it was bad, you get a wee bit of heat out of it. I think the armature's okay, but I don't know what that noise was. Unless it's just when she's running fast, the bearings sound worse. I have to press that out on the bearing press. Keep going now. Either that, or it could actually be worn gears up on here. Or the bearing on the crank also. Actually, it could be the gears. Strip it down the rest of the way and I'll check them out. definitely wear on it now. Not meshing right anymore. And we'll press them out and see. No, it's just pressed on. Drops on. You can feel that already. Alright, you can feel a burr on it anyway. You can tell it's a little bit worn. We'll not know till you actually wash it out. There's actually 2 needle bearings in this housing, but they're also pressed on. Not even sure if you get them separately. Might have to replace the actual head to replace them needle bearings. But they still look intact. There's definitely wear on it. This one's a bit iffy. I'll wash this out and see what she looks like first. If the bearings are any worse, I will just go ahead and replace, and hopefully it'll run quieter. If that there's the only bad one, this one here is actually perfect. So it's not the bearings. This is the wear on the armature on the gears. Replacing this on its own mightn't make any difference. It'll definitely last longer, but it could be very noisy because this here armature is actually worn too. I'll have to see what we're going to do, unless I have a second hand one of these that's in better shape. But I'll wash this out first and see if there's anything else we need. So this here metal ring here, it's actually a damper. Steel on one side and rubber on the other side. Just make sure the rubber on that hasn't perished. They can fail. Everything else is fairly dirty, but in otherwise good enough shape. Tool holder's still good as well. Keyways are all still on it. And that there just needs a wash out. Right, clean it down and see where we're going to go from there. So after a good wash out, we can see exactly what we're going to do. What we're going to do is as little as possible. This actual crank is worn. The gear teeth are starting to wear, especially up here, but it's not totally worn out. We could replace it, but that costs about €80. But there's not much point in replacing that and leaving the armature. Again, not worn out, but still worn. So if we replace that and leave this, it's just going to be as noisy as ever because these 2 gears aren't going to match. So back over this side. Ain't too bad. It's worn, but not too badly. But here, you can see it has worn quite a bit. You can see how the teeth have actually broken on. You see, these are actually cycloidal gears. Actual teeth aren't straight. If you look at the actual profile of the gear teeth, they're rounded. They've got a belly on them. It's a cycloidal curve, and that is designed so that they actually stay in contact with each other through the whole rotation. If they're flat cut gears, they're only going to make a point load contact and they wear very quick. But cycloidal gears actually make contact the whole way across the rotation, and actual several teeth can make contact at the same time, so it spreads the load better and they wear better. But when they wear on like this, they're actually matched to each other. So if I put a new crank in with this, those cycloidal curves aren't going to match. It'll be a bit like turn it around this way. You see them, those curves just aren't going to match up. They don't mesh correctly. So there's not much point in changing that. without changing this. That costs another €100. So to replace these two, it's going to cost nearly €200 alone. Not much point in doing that when the machine's actually still running. It's not running great, but it's still running. All it needs to actually get the hammer working is basically a bit of new grease and a few new O-rings, and that'll actually keep it running. So instead of spending an extra 200 fixing this, which is just going to make it quieter, just get the machine up and running again and hammering correctly, which will be far better in the long run, because when these eventually do wear out and fail, all you're going to be doing is replacing these anyway. You're not really going to be saving any money from replacing them now. Better off letting it run on until these completely wear out and are gone completely, then replacing them along with a wee service kit. That'll keep the hammer actually running for longer into the future. So these I'm just going to reuse because the motor's still working fine and everything else is working. All it needs is get better compression, and for that we don't even need many parts. We need brushes because they're worn out. We need bearings because this one is gone, so we may as well just change it to 2. But to actually get it hammering right again, all we need is these 2 O-rings, 213958-6 if you ever need them. They cost about $4 or $4.50 each. One on the striker, one on the piston. That'll get the thing compressing again with new grease, get it up and running. Just in case, we'll also change this oil seal on the bottom, because I don't think this has ever been changed before. Wouldn't want to go rebuilding this here with new grease just for this here to eventually fail and for it all leaking out. We'll just replace that as well, plus some grease. Now the tool holder, for the rotation, the way it was turning a wee bit, there's not much you can do. The problem is these steel balls are worn onto the tool holder itself, so they're sitting there to lock it. So whenever you actually disengage these, it allows it to move. But you can see where that one is actually worn on. To fix that, you'd actually need to replace that tool holder. There's absolutely nothing else wrong with that thing apart from this little bit of wear. Just would not be worth replacing it just for that. So I'm going to keep using that as well. He's just going to have to use it the way it is. So first off, I'll just change this oil seal. Lip faces into the grease. Also put a little bit at the bottom too. Next thing is change the bearings. Just be careful, you're taking that bearing off. Don't have your actual clamps the whole way on. There's a steel washer underneath that. I'll leave them wide enough to grab the bearing, but not bend the actual washer. So this top one is a 6201. Don't forget a little oil seal as well, or oil ring. This is the actual lip seal running on, not the armature itself. bottom you have a 608. Don't forget this little red insulation washer, because that's it has the actual magnets for the magnetic pickup for the speed control. So if your machine ever doesn't work on the right speed or shuts down whenever you start it up, just check that little magnetic ring. That's the new bearings. These obviously won't cure the noise, but it will help to an extent. So your air deflector goes on first before you fit your armature. Press that on. I'll just put the motor together to get it out of the way. Just make sure them screws are still tight for this field. See, it has rubbed previously, look. So unless that bearing was going bad, or maybe it was gone before somebody replaced it. But there was a little bit of rubbing going on there at one stage. Jeez, good job it was not. Just get this crank in out of the way. Be one less part laying on the bench. Before that goes on, make sure you have this washer on as well. That's just to stop the bottom of the crank rubbing on the aluminium casing. Steel wears better than aluminium. Let's put that aside for now. Actually, we'll just put the fan back on too. More so just to protect the thread on the end of it. And the actual wear in the fan, something must have got on through the vents and actually wore it. Whatever it was is actually gone now. There's no damage on the base. So it's a little bit worn, but it'll do it no harm. That's the base ready, or the motor. Now one other little thing is this wee piece here. This fell out whenever I was dismantling it. This here is actually in a few different models of Makita hammers, some of the older ones, this being one of them. First time you ever work on them, when you come across this laying on the bench, it can be a real head scratcher, trying to figure out what the hell this wee thing's for. Doesn't look to have any relation to the hammer. You might be a while looking at that thing, trying to figure out where it goes. All it's actually for is we're pushing in the sensor for the speed pickup on the back of the actual armature that we read. insulating washer. That's sitting down inside that deep bore. This is just to keep it pressed on. That's it. Literally just pushes on there. That's where it goes if you ever find it in the bench. Just trying to figure out where it came from. And the actual hammer pipe is inside the aluminium housing. Generally, you don't need to do very much with this. There's not much can actually go wrong unless you break one of the actual rings inside. But just in case, because there is a little bit of a rattle out of it, make sure nothing's worn too badly. Actually just clean that out the rest of the way also, because there's still some grease in there. Clean this first and see what she's like. It's a good job I'd actually opened that and looked. There's nothing actually wrong. There's nothing broken or anything. Everything's in good shape. But there's some sort of grit inside of it. Grit or metal filings or something. I imagine either this seal failed one other time before, or else it broke something inside. It had metal debris. Somebody's actually repaired it before, but inside of here was all gritty. So if I hadn't washed that out, that grit eventually would have migrated out and damaged the new O-rings if yet to fit. Now that it is dismantled, I need to give it a good bit of coat of grease before I put it back together again. The grease doesn't normally get into this, very handy if you initially start running it. All that's on here is a wee spring clip, steel ring, spring, this aluminium assembly, and another spring clip up here. There's not actually much in it. And obviously the tool holder itself, and obviously the hammer pipe itself. I'll just slide back in. Now the actual problem, the O-rings. And the piston and the hammer. Hammer one being probably the worst one. You can actually hear the hammer sliding back and forth, and if you tip the machine back and forth, it's a good sign there's no compression. Into the grease in there. That's how you want it to sound. Nothing. You want that hammer to move, and if you tip it, it should only be the piston. The right compression, able to move that hammer. Rid of them. Fit the piston. Another wee squirt of heavy stuff on there. I'll be putting in lighter stuff at the end, actual Makita stuff. It'll eventually mix through the heavier grease. That heavier stuff on its own, falling on the side of here, would actually be too thick for this machine. Put too much strain on the actual motor. So you need the lighter stuff as well. So just get a wee touch of Loctite. Just to ensure these bolts don't back out whenever the machine's actually up and running. The actual bolt goes onto the tool holder first. Just give that wee fluoride ring. A bit of grease as well. Of that split. There's a line in the middle of it if it's starting to split or break in half. Make sure you replace that. If it's not broken, it should be fine to reuse. If you do replace it, it'll be a tight fit. Just be careful putting it in. You might have to just tuck it in as you're pressing it in. It'll be initially a tight fit whenever you put a new one on. But this one's fine. Quite expensive to replace them as well. Some of them fluoride rings can cost about €20. That on first. And then there's a wee dual ring as well. Steel ring with a wash or rubber on the end of it. Steel side goes to the hammer bolt, and the rubber side goes to the plastic inside of here. Just throwing that cover now as well. That on. A rubber ring and a steel washer on top of it. And your C-clip to hold it all on. For grease, inside of here, takes 30 ml of grease. You can get the actual Makita stuff, this yellow Makita. It's 181490-7. Costs around €10 for that there 30 ml tube. That there is fine for this, but I already have some grease in here, so I'm not going to use the full 30. But too much in is just as bad as too little. So I only want 30 ml in this. I don't want to open this. I only use some of it, so I'm not going to use the Makita stuff. I'm just going to use the Bosch, which I have measured out here. So I'm just going to put 20 ml into this. So I have the heavier stuff up this side anyway. And lastly then, a tool holder. This one doesn't need expensive grease, just chisel grease will be fine. Never use chisel grease, the cheaper stuff, for inside the hammer mechanism. It's not what it's for. It's not going to give you any wear resistance in the gears. Basically just for keeping your chisel lubricated and to help expel dirt from the tool holder. Drop on these 4 little steel balls. Drop them in. It's just this flat washer then, it holds them down, stops them coming out. And then this very light spring clip, it holds down the washer. Spring clip to hold that on, and you have your sleeve and your cap. Don't need the old brushes. Last thing then is a few screws for the handle and your cable clamp. I've also just cut the cable as well, took a few inches off of it because they always break down around this area here, so just cut off the weak spot so it actually lasts a little bit longer. That'll save me charging this man for this repair and then potentially it coming on a few months later again with a broken cable. That should be us. So the coarse thread screw has gone onto the plastic body, and the fine thread, the machine thread, has gone onto the aluminium head up here. Not the other way around. Into these things I get on. The big coarse thread driven onto the aluminium, and this one screwed onto nothing down here. And that should be it. Now the all important question, what does she sound like? It actually does sound an awful lot better. Way better than what she did. Them bearings made a massive difference. Quietened down the motor quite a bit. And just tightened everything up again so it's not as loose and rattly inside. So the gears don't sound as bad now. In other words, if I had to change that crank and the armature, it wouldn't have actually come out sounding any better than what it does right now. that's her. 16-year-old Makita HM0860C wee chipping hammer. Fixed up again with just a few wee cheap parts to get it tightened up and hammering right again. That just goes to show you the difference a few new good bearings can actually make, even if they're not gone completely. Use fresh bearings likely tighten everything up that little bit. So that's her. One Makita HM0860C up and running again. So all in, that their repair cost roughly around €130 altogether. That's including labour and VAT. To buy an equivalent machine to this today, which would be the HM0870, you'd be looking at €500. So it's costing $500 to buy a new one, or you can keep your old one running for $130. I know which one I'd be going for anyway. Anyway folks, thanks for watching. As always, give us a wee like and a follow down below if you're enjoying the videos folks. And if you want to help out the channel, hit that share and subscribe button too. Thanks for watching. Cheers.